Traveling is supposed to broaden your horizons, but for some, it is just a chance to complain. We tracked down 55 of the most delusional reviews for world-famous landmarks. We found travelers angry that the Grand Canyon is just a hole, and that the Golden Gate Bridge isn't made of actual gold. Get ready to see what happens when history's greatest wonders meet the internet's worst critics. 1. Imagine driving all the way to Arizona, standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon, one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, and thinking, "Me." One disappointed visitor actually left a 1-star review saying, "I have seen better holes in the ground. I really want to know what other holes this person is hanging out around." They complained that it was just rocks and dirt and that taking a helicopter tour was a huge waste because you just see more rocks from a different angle. It is literally a canyon. What were they expecting? 2. Scotland's Loch Ness is famous for one thing: a mythical monster that probably does not exist. That did not stop one tourist from demanding a full refund. They sat by the lake for an entire afternoon, ate a sandwich, and when Nessie failed to make a cameo appearance, they took to the internet to rage. They wrote, "I wasted my whole day. No monster, just a big cold lake. False advertising." Be honest with me here. If you pay for a tour to see a mythical creature, are you a victim of a scam? Or are you just a little bit gullible? 3. Stonehenge is a prehistoric marvel that has baffled scientists for centuries. But to one reviewer, it is just a pile of rocks in a field. They were genuinely upset that they could not go up and touch the stones, calling it a roadside attraction with an ego. They suggested that if you have seen a rock in your backyard, you have basically seen Stonehenge. Imagine surviving thousands of years of history just to be compared to some gravel in a suburban driveway. Would you pay $30 to look at some old rocks from a distance, or are you skipping this one? 4. It is called the Great Wall of China for a reason, mostly because it is really, really long. However, one traveler felt personally victimized by the physical exertion required. They wrote a scathing review, complaining that the wall was too long and had too many steps. They were exhausted after 20 minutes and blamed the builders for not installing escalators or lifts. Yes, they wanted an elevator on an ancient fortification designed to keep out Mongol armies. I am pretty sure defense strategy did not prioritize Ada compliance in the 7th century BC. 5. You go to Pisa for one reason, and that is to see the tower lean. That is the whole point. Yet, a concerned visitor left a 1-star review stating, "It looks like it is going to fall over. Very unsafe." They were actually mad that the architects had not fixed it yet. They suggested that the city should straighten it out so it looks like a proper building. If they straightened it, nobody would visit. That is like complaining that the ocean is too wet. Some people just want to watch the world turn beige. 6. Paris is the city of love, but there was no love lost for the Eiffel Tower from this reviewer. They described the iconic structure as a big hunk of useless metal. They were annoyed that there was not enough to do once they got to the top other than look at the view. They claimed they could see the same view on Google Earth without paying for a ticket. I mean, technically they are right, but you cannot get an overpriced crepe and propose to your fiancé on Google Earth, can you? 7. When you visit the Colosseum in Rome, you are stepping into the arena of gladiators. However, one tourist was shocked to find it in a state of disrepair. They complained, "It is a ruin! Why haven't they finished building it?" They felt ripped off, paying to see a broken building, with missing seats and crumbling walls. They seriously thought they were visiting a brand new stadium and were disappointed they could not catch a football game. Who is going to tell them it has been like that for nearly 2,000 years? Be honest, does it bother you when historical sites are left as ruins? Or should they rebuild them to look new? 8. Nature can be overwhelming, especially when millions of gallons of water are involved. One visitor to Niagara Falls was less than impressed, leaving a review that simply said, "Too much water, very loud." They were annoyed that the mist ruined their hair and that the sound of the crashing water gave them a headache. They suggested the park service should turn down the flow during off-peak hours. I am struggling to understand the physics of how one simply turns down a massive waterfall, but clearly, this person thinks there is a giant faucet handle somewhere. 9. The pyramids of Giza are the only remaining wonder of the ancient world. Massive tombs built with precision that we still cannot fully explain. The review? Just really big triangles. This tourist was bored after 5 minutes because, according to them, once you see one side, you have seen them all. They also complained about the heat and the sand, which is a bold move when visiting a desert in Egypt. They advised others to save their money and just look at a picture of a geometry textbook instead. 10. Watching the changing of the guard is a London staple, known for the soldiers' absolute stoicism. However, the serious nature of the King's Guard really rubbed one visitor the wrong way. The feedback read, "The guards were rude. I tried to make one laugh and he ignored me." This tourist was genuinely insulted that a highly trained soldier on active duty didn't stop to take a selfie or giggle at a bad joke. Do you think tourists should be allowed to try and distract the guards? Or should people just leave them alone to do their job? 11. If you are booking a trip to Venice, Italy, you probably know 2 things. It is beautiful and it is full of water. Well, one traveler missed the memo. They left a furious review complaining that the city had too many canals and absolutely no roads for cars. They were genuinely shocked that they could not drive their rental car to the hotel door and had to drag their luggage onto a boat. They called the whole city a sanitation nightmare and suggested the mayor should pave over the canals to make it more modern. Imagine visiting a floating city and asking for asphalt. 12. The Statue of Liberty is the ultimate symbol of freedom, standing tall in New York Harbor. But for one unimpressed visitor, Lady Liberty was a massive letdown. They complained that she was much smaller in person and that from the ferry, she looked like a green toy. They also took issue with the fact that they were not allowed to climb up to the torch, calling the safety regulations a conspiracy to ruin fun. I guess unless a statue is large enough to see from space, it just does not count. 13. Heading over to Paris, the Louvre is home to the most famous painting on Earth, the Mona Lisa. But apparently, Leonardo da Vinci didn't use a big enough canvas for modern tastes. A tourist complained that the painting was tiny and depressing, and that the woman looked like she was smelling something bad. They were furious they had to wait in line just to see a small portrait behind glass. To be fair, she is smaller than you think, but calling the Mona Lisa a glorified stamp is a bit harsh. 14. Yellowstone National Park has Old Faithful, a geyser famous for erupting on a schedule. But nature is not a Swiss train, and sometimes it is a few minutes off. One reviewer was having none of it. They gave the park 1 star because the geyser erupted 3 minutes later than the ranger predicted. They wrote, "We waited in the cold for nothing but steam. Very unorganized." They actually wanted to speak to a manager about the Earth's geothermal activity. I am not sure who they think is running the magma chamber down there, but I doubt they have a customer service department. 15. The Hollywood Walk of Fame sounds glamorous, a place where stars are immortalized in the sidewalk. In reality, it is mostly a dirty pavement in front of souvenir shops. One tourist was heartbroken to discover this, describing it as a filthy sidewalk full of people in bad costumes. They were specifically mad that they had to look down to see the stars, which hurt their neck, and that they stepped in gum on top of their favorite celebrity's name. It is a harsh lesson that Tinseltown sparkles a lot more in the movies than it does on a Tuesday afternoon in Los Angeles. 16. The Parthenon in Athens is the crown jewel of ancient Greece, a masterpiece of classical architecture. Or, if you ask this guy, a dilapidated shed. The reviewer complained that the Greek government should fix the roof because it looked messy. They were annoyed that there were cranes on site for restoration work, claiming it ruined their selfies. They suggested that they should just tear it down and build a nice hotel or a shopping mall instead, because nobody wants to look at broken pillars. It survived wars and explosions, but it might not survive this guy's Yelp review. 17. Mount Rushmore features the 60-foot faces of 4 American presidents carved into granite. It is a massive engineering feat. However, one visitor felt the viewing deck was too far away. They wrote, "You can barely see them. They should have built escalators going up the noses." They were disappointed that the experience was just looking at a mountain and asked, "Is that it?" It makes you wonder, would you drive hours into the middle of nowhere just to stare at 4 stone heads? Or is this one American road trip stop you're happy to skip? 18. The Sistine Chapel contains some of the most incredible art in human history, painted by Michelangelo himself. But for one critic, it was a literal pain in the neck. They complained, "Who puts paintings on the ceiling? Terrible design." They were angry that they had to look up the whole time and said the room was too crowded with people staring at the roof like idiots. They suggested the Vatican should lower the ceiling or just project the images on the floor so people do not get cramps. Honestly, complaining about the ergonomics of Renaissance art is a level of entitlement I almost respect. 19. The Dead Sea is famous for being so salty that you float effortlessly, but it is also famous for stinging if you have even a tiny scratch. One traveler was outraged by the salinity. They posted, "The water is too salty, it hurt my eyes. Do not go in." They seemed genuinely surprised that a place called the Salt Sea was, in fact, full of salt. They also complained that the mud was dirty and ruined their swimsuit. It is nature, not a spa resort in Beverly Hills. What did they expect? Cucumber slices and a freshwater rinse every 5 minutes. 20. Machu Picchu requires a journey high into the Andes Mountains, often involving difficult hiking or a long train ride. One tourist made the trek only to call it a bunch of old rocks. They complained that there was no Wi-Fi at the top and that the food options were terrible. They wrote, "I climbed all this way and there isn't even a McDonald's, just llamas and ruins." They felt the Incas really dropped the ball on modern amenities. Imagine building a city in the clouds in the 15th century only to get a 1-star review because you forgot to install a router. 21. Ben Nevis is the highest mountain in the United Kingdom, offering breathtaking views to those willing to make the climb. But one hiker was furious about the basic concept of a mountain. They left a 1-star review, complaining that it was too steep and very high. They were actually angry that there was no flat route to the summit. They wrote, "I didn't expect to be walking uphill for 4 hours. It is a mountain, not a hallway. Seriously, what is the laziest thing you have ever complained about? Because being mad at a mountain for having an incline is going to be hard to beat." 22. Visitors flock to the White House hoping to catch a glimpse of the president, but security is understandably tight. One tourist was personally offended that they were not invited in for tea. They complained, "I couldn't even see the Oval Office from the street. The fence is too high." They called it a waste of taxpayer money because the president did not come out to wave at them specifically. Imagine thinking the leader of the free world is basically a Disney character who should be doing meet and greets every hour on the hour. 23. The Great Barrier Reef is a natural miracle, teeming with colorful marine life. However, one snorkeler found the experience to be a bit too immersive. Their complaint? Too many fish. They were freaked out by the amount of life in the water and said the coral looked messy and unorganized. They suggested the tour operator should clear out some of the fish so people could swim in peace. It is the ocean. That is where the fish live. That is like walking into someone's living room and complaining that their family is there. 24. Alcatraz was once a high-security federal prison housing notorious criminals like Al Capone. The tour is grim, fascinating, and historical. But for one reviewer, it was just a bummer. They wrote, "It is just a depressing old jail. The cells are small and it is cold." They were upset that the audio tour was too sad and that there was nowhere comfortable to sit. They seemed to forget that the whole point of Alcatraz was to make people miserable. If it was cozy and cheerful, it would have been a terrible prison, wouldn't it? 25. Copenhagen's Little Mermaid statue is a national icon, inspired by the fairy tale. To be fair, she is quite small, sitting quietly on a rock in the harbor. One tourist, however, was expecting a blockbuster movie set. They raged, "She is tiny, and she doesn't do anything." They were mad she wasn't singing or splashing around. They called it underwhelming compared to the Disney movie. It is a bronze statue from 1913, not an animatronic robot at a theme park. 26. The Palace of Versailles in France is the definition of opulence, dripping in gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. But to one minimalist critic, it was just too much. They complained, "Tacky, too much gold everywhere, it hurts the eyes." They felt the decoration was gaudy and show-offy. I mean, yes, that was exactly the point of King Louis XIV. He wasn't exactly known for his subtle Scandinavian interior design choices. Complaining about wealth at Versailles is like complaining about cheese on a pizza. 27. Times Square is the neon heart of New York City, famous for its lights, crowds, and chaos. But one visitor was shocked to find exactly that. They wrote, "Too many lights, it gave me a headache, and too many people trying to sell me things." They were genuinely annoyed that it was not a quiet, relaxing park. They asked, "Why is it so loud at night?" It is the city that never sleeps. Do you find places like Times Square exciting? Or are they just anxiety-inducing tourist traps that you avoid at all costs? 28. Japan's Mount Fuji is famously shy, often hiding behind clouds for days at a time. This meteorological fact enraged a traveler who flew in specifically for the view and left empty-handed. "I could not see the mountain, just white clouds, 1 star." Blaming the country of Japan for the weather patterns is a bold strategy. The review actually suggested the tourism board should install giant fans to blow the clouds away. I would love to see the budget proposal for a wind machine the size of a mountain. 29. The London Eye offers a slow panoramic view of the British capital. But one visitor missed the point entirely. They complained, "It is just a boring, slow Ferris wheel." They were actually mad that it didn't spin faster or have any loops. They wrote, "I paid £30 to sit in a glass bubble." Apparently, they confused a sightseeing wheel with a high-speed coaster. If you are looking for G-force, maybe do not pick the attraction famous for crawling at 10 inches per second. 30. Ascending the Empire State Building gives you a commanding view of the New York skyline from above. But for one observer, the scenery was incredibly repetitive. It is just a bunch of other buildings, boring. Paying top dollar to see rooftops and water towers was a total waste of money in their eyes. The complaint questioned why anyone cares about seeing a city from above when it looks the same from the ground. I guess if you don't like concrete and steel, maybe don't visit a concrete jungle. EOWARTIA 31. You would think booking a trip to the Amazon rainforest implies a certain level of appreciation for nature. Not for this traveler. They left a scathing review complaining that there were too many trees and that the forest was infested with bugs. They were genuinely shocked that a rainforest contained rain, forests, and insects. They also expressed deep frustration that they could not get a decent cell signal to upload their photos, claiming the lack of 5G was unacceptable in the middle of the jungle. I am not sure which carrier covers the piranha-infested river basin, but I assume the coverage map has a few gaps. 32. Big Ben is arguably the most famous clock in the world, ticking away in London. However, one tech-savvy tourist found the whole concept outdated. They wrote, "It is just a big clock. I have a clock on my phone. Why is this special?" They were annoyed that they stood in the rain just to hear a bell ring, calling it a noisy alarm clock that you can't turn off. They suggested replacing the face with a giant digital screen so people could see the time more clearly. Because nothing says historic British charm like a massive LED billboard. 33. Santorini looks like a dream in photos. White buildings, blue domes, sparkling sea. But the reality involves a lot of stairs and a lot of donkeys. One visitor was horrified by the biology of it all. They complained, "The whole island smells like animals, and there are too many steps to get to the hotel." They were expecting an elevator to the caldera and were furious that their designer shoes got dirty. Be honest, would you hike 600 steps, smelling like a barn, just for one Instagram photo? Or are you skipping the cardio? 34. The Sydney Opera House is an architectural masterpiece, instantly recognizable by its white sails. But up close, those sails are actually covered in over 1 million beige and white tiles. One tourist felt completely scammed by this detail. They left a 1-star review screaming, "It is not white, it looks like dirty bathroom tiles." They described the building as an overturned dish rack and demanded the city painted a proper bright white so it looks better in pictures. Imagine flying 20 hours to Australia just to critique the grout work. 35. Chasing the northern lights is a bucket list item for many, but nature does not always cooperate. One traveler to Iceland was furious that the lights did not appear on schedule. They wrote, "We waited for 3 hours in the cold. No lights. Total scam." They actually blamed the tour guide for not turning them on and felt the tour company should have control over solar wind and magnetic fields. They demanded a refund for the defective sky. I guess they thought the aurora borealis came with a remote control. 36. The Alamo is a sacred site in Texas history, a symbol of heroic resistance. To one visitor, though, it was just a tiny old house in downtown San Antonio. They complained, "It is so small, I expected a castle." They were disappointed that it was surrounded by modern buildings and traffic, ruining the immersion. They essentially reviewed a battle site where people died for freedom as if it were a disappointing Airbnb rental. 37. Yellowstone strikes again, this time with the Grand Prismatic Spring. It is a stunning rainbow-colored hot spring, but it is also volcanic, which means it smells like sulfur. One reviewer could not get past the odor. They wrote, "Beautiful colors, but it smells like rotten eggs. I almost threw up." They suggested the park rangers should spray some air freshener or find a way to filter the smell. They wanted to enjoy the geothermal wonder of the world, but only if it smelled like lavender and vanilla. 38. The Berlin Wall is a powerful monument to the division of the Cold War and the triumph of freedom. Or, if you are this tourist, it is just some concrete with graffiti. They complained that the East Side Gallery was messy and that the city should clean off the paintings to make the wall look new again. They completely missed the point that the art is the message. They suggested tearing the rest of it down because it blocks the view of the river. History is apparently too inconvenient for a good view. 39. The Taj Mahal is a mausoleum built by an emperor for his favorite wife, a symbol of eternal love. However, one romantic soul described it as just a big grave. They were annoyed that they had to take their shoes off to enter and complained that the marble was cold on the feet. They also noted that there was no Wi-Fi inside the tomb itself, because when you are standing inside a 17th century architectural wonder, the most important thing is checking your emails. 40. Mount Everest. Base camp is the gateway to the highest point on Earth, a place of extreme endurance. One trekker, however, was shocked by the temperature. They reviewed the experience saying, "It was freezing cold. There is snow everywhere and the heating in the tents is terrible." They were mad that the hotel service on a glacier was lacking. They genuinely expected luxury accommodations at 17,000 feet. Here is a serious question. Would you pay $50,000 to freeze in a tent for glory, or are you perfectly happy staying on the couch? 41. Hiking up the dusty hills of Los Angeles to see the Hollywood sign is a rite of passage, but the reality was a bitter pill for one specific tourist. The review stated, "You cannot even touch the letters. Terrible view." Access is strictly restricted for security reasons, yet this person felt personally attacked by the chain link fences and the distance. It is simply 9 white letters on a dirt hill, but the expectation was apparently a jungle gym experience for adults where they could swing from the letter H like Tarzan. 42. Pompeii offers a frozen snapshot of Roman life destroyed by a volcano, a fascinating archaeological site frozen in time. Not for everyone, apparently. One visitor described it as just a bunch of dusty old bricks without roofs. The lack of modern maintenance was the main gripe, with the reviewer genuinely suggesting they should pave the streets to make walking easier for tourists. Complaining that a city historically destroyed by a massive volcanic eruption looks a bit messy and broken is a special kind of oblivious. 43. San Francisco's most famous landmark is known for its distinct color, international orange. But one tourist felt lied to. They were furious that the bridge was not actually gold. They wrote, "False advertising. It is red, not gold. I want my toll money back." To make matters worse, they visited on a foggy day and could not see the top, blaming the city for not clearing the weather for their photo op. Imagine demanding a refund on a bridge toll because you do not understand how metaphors work. 44. The Forbidden City is the massive imperial palace of China, famous for its incredible scale and deep history. Yet, the interior design failed to impress one critic who felt the place was too hollow. The review complained, "All the rooms are empty. Where is the furniture?" Apparently, the lack of sofas and TVs made the imperial residence feel unlived in and boring. It seems they were expecting a fully furnished IKEA showroom, rather than a preserved historical monument where the emperor actually lived centuries ago. 45. Joshua Tree. National Park is a stunning desert landscape famous for its unique, twisted trees. But one nature lover was not impressed by the flora. They left a review saying, "The trees look weird, like they are dying." They were upset that the park was just dirt and funny bushes, and demanded to know why there were not any normal trees like oaks or pines. They traveled to a unique ecosystem just to complain that it did not look exactly like their backyard in Ohio. 46. Legend says if you throw a coin into the Trevi Fountain, you will return to Rome one day. One tourist, however, just wants their coin back immediately. The complaint focused entirely on the sheer number of people, stating, "I couldn't get a photo without strangers in it. Too crowded." The fact that thousands of other people had the exact same idea to visit a public landmark seemed to come as a total shock to them. If you want a private fountain experience, you might need to buy a garden hose instead. 47. In the heart of the Australian outback sits Uluru, a sacred sandstone monolith that glows red at sunset. To the uninspired eye, though, it lacks a certain pizzazz. One review summed it up as, "Just a big red rock, nothing else to do." The drive was too long, the flies were annoying, and the rock just sat there, being rocky. It is barely understandable what else a geological formation is supposed to do to entertain this person. Were they expecting the rock to do a tap dance or host a laser light show? 48. Whether it is Hawaii, Florida, or the Caribbean, this review pops up everywhere. The sand was too sandy. One specific reviewer for a pristine beach wrote, "The sand gets everywhere. It sticks to your skin and gets in your food. I hate it." They gave the beach 1 star because of the physical properties of granular silica. They suggested the resort should pave the beach or put down carpets. A carpeted beach. Just let that image sink in for a second. 49. The Burj Khalifa in Dubai is the tallest building on Earth, but one visitor found this to be a serious design flaw. They wrote, "It is way too tall. The elevator ride made my ears pop." They were genuinely mad that the world's tallest building was, in fact, tall. They also complained that the cars on the ground looked like ants, and that they couldn't see any details. I am not sure what they expected from half a mile up. Maybe they wanted the architect to lower it a few hundred floors just for their comfort. 50. Kissing the Blarney Stone in Ireland is supposed to give you the gift of eloquence. One germaphobe, however, was horrified by the hygiene implications of the tradition. The review read, "Disgusting. You have to lie on your back and kiss a rock that everyone else kissed." The lack of sanitizer between smooches was a complete deal-breaker for them. To be fair, putting your mouth on a cold stone slobbered on by millions of other tourists is a questionable health choice, but that is the tradition. 51. Standing guard over the Giza Plateau, the Great Sphinx is one of history's most recognizable statues. Yet, the condition of its face was a deal-breaker for one particular critic. The review stated, "It is broken. The nose is missing. Poor maintenance." This person was genuinely annoyed that a 4,000-year-old limestone statue had suffered some erosion over the millennia. They suggested the Egyptian government should patch it up with some cement so it looks brand new again. Imagine wanting to bondo the face of an ancient wonder like it is a dented fender on a used sedan. 52. Deep beneath the streets of Paris lie the catacombs, the final resting place for millions of Parisians. It is famous for being a macabre, bone-filled labyrinth. However, one visitor felt the decor was a bit repetitive. They wrote, "Too many bones. It is very gloomy and not fun at all." I am not sure what kind of party atmosphere they were expecting in a literal mass grave. They complained that there were no cheery decorations to lighten the mood. It is the catacombs, not a haunted house attraction at a carnival. The gloom is the entire point. 53. Chicago's Cloud Gate, affectionately known as the Bean, is a massive polished steel sculpture that reflects the city skyline. But for one hygiene-obsessed tourist, it was a nightmare. The complaint read, "It is covered in fingerprints, very dirty. People touch it too much." They were disgusted that a piece of public art in a major park was not sanitized between every single visitor. They demanded that the city hire someone to stand there with a bottle of Windex 24 hours a day. 54. The Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah are famous for being perfectly flat and incredibly white, stretching as far as the eye can see. To a racing enthusiast, it is paradise. To this reviewer, it was a void. They posted, "It is just a lot of flat ground. Nothing to see. Very boring." They drove all the way out there and were shocked to find that the salt flats were, in fact, flat and salty. They suggested building a mall or a casino in the middle of it, so there would be something to do. 55. We finish with the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, a symbol of American independence. Most people know it has a crack in it. That is its defining feature. But one tourist felt ripped off by this defect. They left a furious one-star review screaming, "It is broken! Why do people come to see a broken bell?" They demanded that the National Park Service melt it down and cast a new one that actually rings. They refused to take a picture with it because they did not want to support shoddy merchandise. And that is 55 proof positive reasons why you absolutely cannot please everyone. We have seen people demand air conditioning in a desert, refunds for the weather, and repair work on ancient ruins. It really makes you wonder what these people are like at a dinner party. Now, I want to hear from you. What is a world-famous landmark that you visited and thought was actually completely overrated? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tour of absurdity, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.